I'm hearing. All right, so I think we're going to get started. I'm Joshua Casper. I'm here with the Beatport group. I'm primarily working with Plugin Boutique, and my job is to teach people how to use virtual instruments and VST plugins to make music. That's what we're going to be doing today. I'm excited to be here and doing it with Originals², a partnership between Beatport and Microsoft. I'm going to be facing this way for most of the stream, or session, whatever we're going to call it. Just if you have questions, maybe write them down and we can answer those at the end. But unfortunately, I'll be faced this way and you'll be behind me. So if you're raising your hand or whatnot, I won't be able to see. But that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. If you're following along, that'd be great too. This is Ableton Live, and I'm going to be starting with Scalar 2. Scalar 2 is an instrument that helps you find your chord progression or the voice of the track you're going to be making. In version 1, it was just pretty simple where it just give you chord progressions, but it's evolved into much more than that. And along the way, we're going to be checking out different things like melodies, bass lines, and everything else. So right now, I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I've got a drum and bass chord progression here. These were made by artists and some of the developers of Scalar. And they're just chord progressions. And right out of the box, if I select one, maybe I could come in here to something like Deep House. I've got a really nice chord progression that I might not have come up with on my own. Now, what I'm actually going to do is come in here to Hip Hop 1. So let's say I really like that chord progression. What I can do is just drag and select all 4 of those and bring them down here to my chord editor. And I just need to delete all of these. So now I have 4 chords, which is a pretty standard chord progression. Of course, you can have more if you want, but we're going to start pretty simple today, just so we don't get too crazy with it. Now, if I press play inside of Ableton Live, I've got my 4 chords that are playing. What I'm going to do is actually come into Ableton Live. This is the loop race, and again, I'm not too sure of your level of experience within a DAW. So I am going to be glossing over a lot of things like how to loop, how to add channels, how to add tracks, MIDI channels, and so forth. But this will be archived, as I said, on, I believe, Beatport's YouTube, Plugin Boutique's YouTube. So you can always go back and try to redo the steps that we're doing here, that we're going to be going fairly quickly. So if I come over here where it says Humanize, and come to, you can see that I can humanize velocity, timing, or both. What this does is adds a human touch. So when I'm playing the keyboard here, I'm never going to hit the notes the same velocity. The velocity is how hard you hit it every time. I'm also not going to hit them perfectly in sync every time. This one might be a little bit later than these two. And this, because we're working with MIDI, will just do that or add those variations for me right out of the gate. So I'm going to turn that on. And another thing, if I press play here, this is actually happening too fast for me. So if I come into the edit here, come into playback timings, select all 4 of my chords, come in here to ×4, it will actually play those chords a little bit longer for me. So I like that a lot more. I'm using the felt piano. It's one of my favorite built-in sounds to Scalar, but inside of Scalar 2.5, which is what you all should have on your machines, you can see that we have a ton of different sounds to choose from. I'm going to leave that there for now and actually close out of here. And if I click right here and just Control D, just like you would in any other program, I can duplicate that channel and scaler. Now I can open up this second scaler, and I can come in and change the sound. So I'm going to come here to choir. So those are the same 4 chords we just had with the piano, now being voiced by a choir, and I think it sounds pretty sweet. What I'm actually going to do, though, is come in and just bring it up an octave. Again, I've selected all 4 of those chords, and inside of the chord voicings, in the edit, so I was in the main, here in the edit, just bring it up an octave. All right. Now, one of the newer features inside of Scalar is the performance options right here. So if I turn on performance, and I actually leave it on performance and play that now, doesn't sound great with the choir, but maybe if I bring it back to vintage piano, let's say. The cool thing is those are the same 4 chords. So it's using the notes of the chords inside of that, essentially a performance. It's got chord information and melodic information in there. And it's still using the same chords that I had before. So I'm actually come back into choir, boost it up. And we've got articulations like arpeggios and strumming for guitars. There's a great guitar engine inside of Scalar 2. We also have performances, phrases, rhythms, bass lines, melodies, sequences, and strumming again for the guitars. I'm going to come into rhythms, and let's just see what we got here. So that's happening a little bit too fast for me, so I can actually just take my playback, drop it down. All right, and now let's listen to both the piano and the choir together. All right, so we're starting to build a track. And again, the cool thing about Scalar is I don't need to worry about the chords. I don't need to worry if everything is going to fit together theoretically, because Scalar is doing all the heavy lifting for me, and we should be good to go. So the next thing I can do, again, duplicate that, come in, and now we can add a bass line. So instead of rhythms, let's come into bass. Instead of choir, we can come down here to the bass guitar. So let's see what everything sounds like together. So I've got bass, and I've got my basic bass patterns. I've also got funk, house, jazz, pop, rock, synthwave, trance, urban. Now these are just sort of, I would say, preset names for these. You don't need to use funk bass in only funk tracks. For example, if I come in here, maybe check out a different one. Up an octave just to see what the now drop it back down. All right, so now we have piano chords, we've got a choir doing a rhythmic pattern and a bass line. Let's add a melodic bit. Control D again. And again, instead of bass, let's go melody. Instead of bass guitar, let's come up to vintage keys. We can speed up that melody if we want. The cool thing about this is that everything here will theoretically be okay together, and you as the artist need to make the decision on what fits the together the best. So if we come in here, we've got colors, motifs, riffs, themes. We've got so much different content inside of here. I'm just going to come in and check out some other ones. Okay, so that's starting to come together. Remember, we're moving very fast, and I'm not taking the time to really mix things properly, but we sort of have the base element for a track. The next thing we can do is put in some drums just to hear what it sounds like with some rhythm. So I'm going to bring in Loopcloud drum. This is a VST that comes with Loopcloud. All of you should have this. It's a pretty standard drum machine. Lots of different content for all different genres of music inside of here. And what I'm going to do is just come into Lo-Fi drums, load up one of the drum kits, come back in here, and let's see what it sounds like. So it's happening way too fast. So it's actually really easy to switch that up. I'm working at 150 BPMs, which is pretty fast unless we half time it. So if I come into where snare is, I can actually remove those, and just changing that and maybe muting some of the busy percussion. And we've got a much more manageable drum sequence. Each one of these pads has its own sequencer where we can make different patterns or rhythms. I've just removed the kick. Hi-hat, let's bring it down a little bit. The record effect, we can also bring that down a little bit. And just going to bring up the reverb here. And now let's see what we've got everything together. All right, so it's starting to come together now that we have some drums in there. The drums are a little bit too repetitive at this point, so what we can do is use the pattern sequencer to add some variation there. So right now we've just got the A pattern looping over and over and over again. Well, what I can do is copy that A pattern to B and C, and then say come into pattern B and add that hi-hat over here. And if I turn on the sequencer now and bring this over, what will happen is it'll go from A to B to A to B. Okay? But we can actually extend that, and instead of going A, B, C, D, we can go A, B, A, and then go to C. So now we'll play A, then B, go back to A, and then go to C. So if we click right here, we can add some more variation to, say, the kick. Add that there. And and turn on the sequencer. And we've got more of a sequence. Oh. All right, is this all making sense so far? Would you say no? All right. So I do hear an issue here that I don't like, and it's this. I don't really like the sound of that. So what I'm going to do is actually take Loopcloud Play and add that into my project here. Loopcloud Play is an instrument that, again, we have so much different content. This comes with Loopcloud. And what I can actually do is take the MIDI information from Scalar and send it to Loopcloud to trigger that as an instrument. So to do that inside of Ableton Live, we come into all ins, and if you don't see that, you just go to the I/O over here in the bottom right and choose the Scalar instance, which would be Scalar right here on channel 4. And then where it says Post Effects, choose Scalar 2 again, and we can go in. So now it's playing that same melodic sequence from that scalar, but into a new instrument. And if I come in here and open it up, now we can choose from any of the instruments I already have, or there is the store, which has a ton more instruments that we can choose from. But for the sake of the tutorial here, I'm going to jump back into what I already have and just check out a few of these percussive plucks. All right, so I'm thinking that one can work. So yeah, it definitely can work, but we need to design it a little bit, do what's called sound designing. So if I click the main menu here, we sort of have quick access control to the sound, especially up here at the top. We have control over the ADSR, or the attack, decay, sustain, and release. This is just the shape of the sound that's coming out of the instrument. As you continue to produce, you will see attack, sustain, decay, and release everywhere. So this, don't worry if you don't get it now. This will all come to you very, very quickly. But I want more of a plucky sound than a sustained sound, and it also does a weird thing. Let me just solo it again. When it's sustained the note, you can kind of hear this kind of wavy sound. If I take the sustain and pull it down, and the decay and pull it down, we can really start to control the shape of the sound, and I'm liking it a little bit shorter for this part. All right. So again, we're coming along quite nicely. I don't know when I started this stream, but we already have the beginnings of something. And I'm going to keep going here today, but tomorrow we're actually going to add vocals to this from Loopcloud, change out the drums, and do a whole lot more, and even get into some mixing and mastering tips as well. So trust me, if you bear with me, this will be amazing in the end, hopefully. So let's talk about the bass line for a second. It sounds really great. It's using an internal instrument inside of Scalar. It's just the bass guitar. But as I said, there are other bass guitars inside of here that we can use, or we can do the same sort of routing we just did with Loopcloud Play and send it to another instrument, or we can affect that bass line using a VST. So the first thing I want to do is actually go ahead and highlight this and show you another method of getting Scalar's MIDI information inside of Ableton Live. Once it's highlighted, if I click and drag, I now have that MIDI sequence inside of Ableton, and I can actually use that now instead of the actual MIDI being behind the scenes. Now I have it here, and now that it's here, I can do anything I want. I can come in and change things. I can make notes longer. I can remove notes, do whatever I want. So there's a plugin that you should have received. It's called Lifeline Expanse. And this is a really great plugin for people just getting into music production, or even people who have been doing it for a while. And the reason why I think it's great for you to have is that you get actually 5 different plugins in one plugin here. So we have the format module, the dirt module, a reamp module, a width module, and a space module, which is a reverb. So you actually have a bunch of different plugins all built into one here for you, easy access. And right off the bat, do you hear the difference? What we can do is come into presets inside of the bass, and now you'll really hear the difference. And at this point, we're just looking for a preset that's close to what we're looking for or what we want in the end. So I like that. It's adding a heavier bottom end for me, and it's actually called bass thickener, so that makes sense. And what I want to do is actually just roll back on the dry wet mix. Dry wet mix is the dry signal is the signal before it goes into the effect here, and the wet mix is after it's been processed. Now 100% wet means all of the audio that we hear has been affected. 0% wet or 100% dry means none of the audio we hear has been affected, and we can go anywhere in between the two to get the desired effect. Now you'll also notice that each one of the modules here also has a dry wet mix as well. So if I don't like, let's say, the format here, I can actually just turn that down or push it up. I actually kind of like it up. Each one of the modules has further algorithms inside of it. So here I'm degrading it, but I can also resample it, flatten it, or a nice wash one, which is kind of like emulating MP3 degradation. I'll just leave it on degrade for now. Dirt is the saturation and distortion module. So each one of these algorithms are going to color the audio in different ways. And again, at this point, it's just to taste. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Depends on the style of music you're making. It depends on what you're trying to do. For me, I'm looking for a bigger bottom end, so a heavier subby feel with a little bit of color on the top so we can hear it out of cell phone and laptop speakers later on down the road. And you might see me bypassing the plugin every now and then. What that does is just takes me 100% dry, so I can hear the before and after quickly and easily and decide if I'm making the right decisions or if I need to push things further or roll back on anything. Each one of these modules has an advanced page where we can actually go further into multiband processing, where we can affect different frequency ranges of the signal in different ways. Each one also has a number of further advanced features that you can tweak out. And really, it's just an overall great plugin to do a number of different things. But I think for today, I'm just going to leave it on the bass. And it's just beefing it up for me, and I dig it. Now, another thing we can do here is if we right-click inside of Ableton Live, we can freeze the track. And what that does is essentially it bounces the MIDI and the effects to audio, and it will help save on CPU later on if you have a huge project with 50 tracks in it and your CPU is giving you a little bit of trouble. Freezing will help you free up CPU for other things that you need to. And the cool thing about freezing, if I right click, I can unfreeze and go back in and further manipulate things later on, or I can actually flatten it and just get the audio, but that is more destructive than just freezing, without the benefit of being able to go back and edit later. Okay. So the other thing I might do here is just take the melody MIDI as well out of the melody scaler and do the same thing. Drag it in there, and then I can actually get rid of this scaler. I can turn it off, come back to it later if I want. And now I've got what? Oh, okay, this is a good learning moment. So right now I've got this set to in, which means it's only going to be receiving information as an input. But I now have the MIDI on the channel, so I don't need it to be set to in. I can just switch it to auto. And it will play the audio for me from there. So let's just see where we are. So right here, I'm actually going to go right click and flatten the track. And this is what our bass line looks like in the waveform. Now I'm going to show you something that's sort of advanced, but as you begin to produce more, you'll actually realize that it's everywhere and everybody talks about it. It's a thing called sidechaining. And to do that, we're going to come into the audio effects inside of Ableton Live, inside of Dynamics, and just drag a compressor onto the channel. Sidechaining is going to take an incoming audio signal and compress whatever the compressor is on, so in this case our bass line, by a certain amount to essentially make it quieter to leave space for something else. A common mixing issue with people who are just getting started with producing is the clash between a bass line and a kick, because the frequency ranges of both of those things are actually pretty similar. So you don't want those to clash, because the low end of a mix needs to be clean to sound good on a good system. So what I'm going to do is right here, if I click this, I'll actually have my sidechain input. And what I can do is come down to Loopcloud drum. I don't know if you can see that, but the threshold is going up in relation to the drum instrument. Oh, I got to turn it on first, sorry. So do you see how this threshold is going along to that kick and snare pattern rather than the bass line? We're going to use that information to compress or kind of remove the bass to let the kick breathe inside of the mix. Now that's an extreme example, but just to show you. Do you hear how it's getting quieter when the snare should be happening, or excuse me, when the kick should be happening? That's exactly what we're trying to do. I did some other things there just by autopilot. I took the attack and brought it all the way down just because we want it to immediately happen when the kick's happening, because kick has a very aggressive transient, which just means the loud part at the beginning of the kick. So we want the compressor to react as soon as possible. We can also switch the compressor to peak, which again is just going to make things happen even quicker rather than the RMS function, which takes sort of a general view of what's happening. And then we can just adjust the release on how quickly we want the bass line to come back in after the kick stops. So if I control click to solo the drum and the bass. Do you hear that? That's with both of them happening with no side chaining. It will just help your kick stand out better in the mix, and the kick is kind of like the heartbeat of any good track that has a kick in it, obviously. So it's important to do that, and I generally do that in the beginning. As soon as I have a bass line and a kick, I go ahead and do my technical mixing style sidechain compression immediately, just so I can continue to hear the music the way it's going to sound later on in the process. You will hear in things like EDM sidechaining where it's like a pumping synth sound. That's also done by sidechaining, but that's more of an artistic sidechain rather than this, which is a technical or mixing style sidechain. All right, so that's pretty good. The last thing I want to do for this session before we start session tomorrow, where we bring in vocals, change up the drums, and start to arrange the track, is just add my own reverb. Now, what I'm going to do is right-click over here and add a return track. Come into my plugins, and I'm going to search for a plugin called Spaced Out from Baby Audio, and drag that onto the return track. Now, this is a delay and reverb plugin that sounds absolutely fantastic. And let me just kind of clarify what a return track is. So when I was using Lifeline Expanse, I dragged it and dropped it right onto the bass channel. That's called an insert effect. That will only affect whatever channel it's on. With something like a reverb, which creates a virtual space for your music to live in, you generally only want one in your track, and you want to have it on a return track, and you can actually send any of your tracks to that return track to have it be affected. Let me show you what that looks like. The first thing to know is you want your wet signal to be 100% because we don't want to duplicate any of the dry signal from any of the tracks we send to it. So I'm actually going to come in here to the Loopcloud Play app and jump into the advanced panel. And this already has a reverb on it. I'm just going to remove it. And that's what the sound sounds like without reverb. It's pretty dull. I think you'll agree. But watch what happens if I use this right here. This is my send amount. This is how much of the signal I'm sending to Spaced Out, which is on a return track. All right, so we can actually send, let's say, this chorus here, or choir. So now that is also being fed into the spaced out return track and just adding more ambiance instead of just stopping kind of abruptly at the end of the sequence that we have inside of Scalar. So now I can come in here and start to tweak out what it sounds like. I'm actually going to do it using the play pluck here. So if I take this right here, I can go more towards the delay so we can really focus on what that sounds like, or I can go more towards the reverb so we can focus on that. And I do highly suggest that when you're trying to really dial in the overall tone of what you're getting out of this. But again, just like Lifeline Expanse, Spaced Out is great because you have a delay and a reverb. And pretty much every musical project you hear that's produced these days is going to have both of those effects. And having them both in one plugin is just a bonus because you only have to pay essentially for one, but you get two. It's great. And the cool thing about this grid is we can come in and change the pattern. So each one of these has a sort of different tonality to it. This one obviously is more for like a glitchy or trip hop, chill out sort of sound. This is more of a clean delay. We can control how much of the feedback stays around. We can also filter it out so we can just get a certain frequency if we wanted. All right, I'm actually going to pull down the, remove that again too. And then we can move over to the delay or the reverb, sorry, and we have a bunch of different options over here as well. Up here at the top, we have the overall sense of how big the room is. So we can go quite small, sort of like a studio space, bigger, even bigger, and then spaced out or outer space, which is just a massive cavern, but that's not what we're looking to do right now. So not only do we have control over that here, but we also have control over the length by coming into the middle of the circle or going out. And then we also have some cool effects if we're looking for flanging or phasing and so forth as we move around. And you can even automate this, which just means setting it up so it moves around on its own. So that is really important. This without that reverb, it's not going to work. No one's going to like that. But with the reverb, we make it sound epic and big, and that's going to play a big role in what we do next. And when we really start to automate everything and make it sound short and sweet at one point, but then really epic at another point. Reverb is your best friend when you start making music. It's also something you need to really pay attention to because it can start to do what's called muddying the mix, which again has to do with that pesky low end and doing too much to conflict or interfere with your bass tones and your kicks and so on. But that's what this filter here is for. So we can make it really mid to high frequencies or leave those low ones in as well. All right, and then just one more playthrough of the loop that we have so far. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. But like I said, tomorrow we're going to jump in and add vocals to it, add sort of a beginning, middle, and an end, change out some sounds. We're going to completely change out the drums and even get into doing some mixing and mastering so we have something cool to work with in the end. So how much of that was just... Oh yeah, tomorrow, and it's all gonna click tomorrow. This is gonna be archived if you want to go back. I might do the presentation again as a actual video if you want to go back and check it out. But hopefully the core concepts of what we've discussed here is what sticks with you, because none of you might make that style of music, but chord progressions, melodies, bass lines, it's all really easy once you get into scalar. And it's so important to actually making a piece of music that a tool like scalar, I don't know, you might be able to speak on it a little bit, someone who's been producing for a while, but.
Yeah, I mean, I use like this traditional wheel, and this is like, seems like the automated version of the chord wheel. So.
Oh, you're talking about the Camelot
Yeah.
mixing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look at scalar too, if we come in here, so, I'm inside of F sharp minor. If you look at where it says style, it actually tell you sort of descriptive words about what that scale will give you. So if it says serious, sad, emotional, and sentimental, I think that's pretty much nailing it on the head for what we've just made. So if you want to go happy, just look for what the right. It's that simple though. If you want to do cinematic, I mean, it's all inside of here. So I've shown you we're making hip hop, but everything, Latin, metal, neo soul, rock, synthwave. Come in here to artists. These are actual from, like, Carl Cox is in here. It's given us great chord progression. MJ Cole. There's just so much by way of presets inside of here, and there's even new features like suggest, which will just suggest what you should do next. Like, it's such a great tool, and the chord progression is what makes your track. Another thing it can help do is change chords. So you'll have a main chord progression, but then for your hook or your chorus, you want to change the chord progression. There actually is sort of an advanced feature inside called modulation, which can help you set up your intermediate chords to get from one scale to the next, to really amplify the impact of the chorus, for example. So, I mean, it can go deep, but it can also be very base level, and it's gonna help you make great music just easily. Yeah. Melodic. Yeah. Most great pieces of music are going to have key changes inside of them, and it's just so it changes the impact when the drop happens or the chorus comes in. So definitely, when you have some time, jump into Scalar, check out some of the presets. There are common chord progressions now as well. If you come in here, right here at the top. Another great thing about Scalar too is, if I had kept all the different instances of scalar, I could come in and just change the entire chord progression for all of them at once and just see what this sounds like in a happy progression. I mean, there really is just so much you can do. And I know it might have been overwhelming for the people who aren't into, oh no, we haven't been using the microphone for questions. I know that some of the keywords, I did my best to try to explain along the way, but it will all start to come to you, especially when you're like, well, I need distortion. You go on YouTube. YouTube is such a great place for all sorts of just free, incredible content. And everybody in here is going to be making different types of music. So you can even look up how to make happy hardcore or whatever it is you're making and just find it. I made like 200 videos last year on all sorts of things. If you check out Plugin Boutique, YouTube, subscribe. Obviously, it's so cheesy to say that. Obviously, comment. But no, I mean, it really is. It's free content, and it's just there to help people be better at making music. So. Please.
Should I talk in the mic?
I think so.
1, 2, 1, 2.
It looks cool, so go ahead.
Why not? Do you recommend any? Do you have any sort of resume where, like, a sort of like beginner guides to production that we should all check out? Like
So-
a big PDF file. I'm looking for that.
Yeah, you don't want. I mean, I think
Yeah.
as music is sort of, it's obviously auditory. PDF, I would say no, but there are like full courses on something like producertech.com where they'll start you. Yeah, I mean we'll put that in an email. If I should have been already, but we can even get you like a couple free months. But it's like just from ground floor, like this is what a track is. This is the difference between MIDI and this and audio. And yeah, it's a lot, but with courses like that by great people who are educated and can do it from the ground up, you absolutely should. So producer tech, and then it's a good idea to start there. And then, as like I said, you'll have more specific questions, and then you can jump into YouTube and be like, how do I make a monster bass growl or something? It depends on what you're trying to do, obviously. But yeah, producer tech, and there are other ones as well. I forget.
Just to have like the basics and knowing how to what music writing is like from the start.
Yep.
And maybe it would help to.
Yep.
Know that.
I would say that, and I'd also say just jump in and go crazy. Seriously, like you might even just make a banger out of just.
I'll send you demos.
Yeah.
I'll send you my demos.
Just a personal question.
Uh-huh.
What kind of music do you produce, and can you like work all of this that we're seeing?
Okay.
or-
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I make all different types of music. I really dig like cinematic infused things. They're kind of like really isn't a genre for what I make, but I like to make music for trailers, this sort of stuff. Yeah, I love the big drums. Love the big drum. I love the love it. But all of this stuff is actually simpler than it looks daunting, right? But it's actually not. If you've ever seen one of those huge mixing desks, for example, and you're like, wait, what? Really, once you know one channel, you know the whole thing. It's just repeated over and over again. And the cool thing about plugins is like you can buy that and plug-in format, and you don't even need to worry about it. And again, no matter what you buy, whether it is a piece of hardware or the software version of it, just YouTube is your best friend about it all.
Yeah, and a lot of the plugin makers, like, and plugin boutique also, they have like so many tutorials because they want you to know how to use their stuff,
Right.
and then you get more stuff as you learn it.
Well, this is the thing, and before you know it, you're going to be like, what's the ratio on the compressor do? Why is that important? What? No, don't be panicked. I mean, it's art. So, like I said, maybe for you the best thing is just to jump in. Well, you've got Loopcloud now. You can make. Tomorrow you'll see it in action, but you can make something that sounds really great in no time, and then you just take it from there where you want to go. But it's just remember to have fun. I think is the don't be like and people are going to come at you about sidechaining. Like people are going to but they're going to be like, you need to mix, and then you need to know about mastering. I would say, just get in, have fun, and make something you're happy with. If I played you the stuff that I made in the beginning, you would laugh me out of the room and say, I can't believe I listened to you for an hour because it's just so terrible. But everybody starts there. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I learned how to DJ on belt-driven turntables, so. Yes.
I mean, the best thing to me about making music is it's just constantly learning, and the faster you can get into that mindset of just wanting to learn and grow and not caring if you make mistakes, then the easier you'll get into the flow, and then the faster you'll have fun making music, and you grow, and then you plateau, and then you grow, and then you grow, and you grow.
Anyone else have a question for the microphone? Nope.
Probably when we start getting into this, I will have like thousands of questions. Maybe this is.
Are you guys? Do you plan on Well, I guess this goes on till 9 o'clock tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, but we have like another photo shoot, and don't we have like another workshop?
Yeah, you got something
So
else.
yeah,
But
we
the
don't
photo
really.
shoot, they said we could also, if we're not in the shoot, you can be playing in the studio.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be here hanging out. If you guys start messing around and you have any questions, I'm here. I'll be here tomorrow too. I'll probably come in around noon. I think the next session with me is at 3. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have any questions, just bring them and I can do my best to answer.
What is this also one of these?
No.
I have some questions on these.
Okay.
I have technical questions basically.
I can try. I'm not a
Software.
Microsoft, but I can try.
Yeah, that's why also she asked about the basic of a producer, how we can find some information. Because I have problem usually with the software situation, how I can find the plugins there in Ableton, how I can use them, like after to use them, yeah. It's nice what I see there, but now. Yes, yes, the thing.
Producer Tech is going to be your best bet. It's just a like 10-hour course of literally, this is how you this is what a plugin is. This is how you install the plugin. This is where you find the plugin. Maybe the differences between some of them. The way I learned was just getting a plugin. Once I learned how to install it and find it, was just throwing it on everything and doing everything. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, that even though I don't know what that name is or what it does technically, I know what it does to the sound, and that's what's important. You know,
Okay.
yeah. It's gonna be
I
a
know.
little bit. I know you're
10 years ago I started to try to produce and I
Right.
quit for this reason.
no, yeah. You
But
got to
now
remember to have fun with it. You just
Yeah, you need to love it. After this, it's gonna be fun.
yeah, I mean, when you finally hear your music on a big system in front of people, it's gonna change your world, especially if people like it. I mean, it could go the other way, but I mean, you'll never know until you put it out
First
there.
podcast.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I will hook everybody up with Producer Tech, and that's definitely going to be your best bet to jump in and start from the ground up. No problem.
Thank you so much.
How was that an hour? I feel like it was quicker.
I wonder if have y'all found the plugins and stuff in Ableton?
That's
No.
the thing. No.
Maybe that could be.
I can show you.
Please follow. And I was like, I'm trying. All of us here.
So
I said a very nice question. No.
in Ableton Live, over here, if you don't see it, you'll just find it. It says plugins right here.
No, there's nothing. Even though it's downloaded, and also I cannot see the applications as an application. So I'm like, I'm gonna find them from Ableton, and then they're not in Ableton.
Okay. Well, we'll stop the stream. I think we're still streaming. I'll stop the stream and then I'll check out your
Perfect.
thing.
No,
And
it's not like special. They're here. We have them. Just maybe I logged in from my account in Ableton. I don't know what I did.
okay. Well, we can do that right now.
Thank you.
I guess if someone's watching, end the stream. Hello.
Is Miami watching?
Miami, where are the plugins?
Where are the plugins?
I think they just left it on